What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a simple chat about his new film, only to face a barrage of personal attacks and condescending remarks that cross every line of professional decency? In just 36 seconds of one particular exchange, a daytime television host's arrogance would spark an altercation so uncomfortable, so filled with tension, that it would end with the guest doing something almost never seen on live television, walking off the set entirely. Hugh Grant arrived at the Loose Women studio that afternoon, expecting a straightforward interview. He had done hundreds of these over the years, talk about the new movie, share a funny anecdote or two, maybe discuss his charity work, and be on his way. Simple, professional, easy. But from the moment he sat down on that famous panel sofa, something felt different. The energy in the room was off. Denise Welch, sitting in the center position as the lead host, had a look on her face that suggested she had an agenda. The other panelists, Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Jane Moore, were arranged around her, ready to jump in as the conversation unfolded. The interview started innocently enough. Denise began with a question about his latest film, a romantic comedy that had been getting positive reviews. Hugh answered politely, smiling, giving the kind of charming responses he was known for. The audience clapped. Everything seemed normal. But then Denise shifted gears. "So Hugh," she said, leaning forward with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes, "let's talk about your personal life, shall we? Because I think that's what everyone really wants to know about." Hugh's smile faltered just slightly. "Well, I'm here to talk about the film, really," he said, keeping his tone light. "That's what we agreed on." "Oh, come on," Denise said, waving her hand dismissively. "Don't be boring. You're Hugh Grant. Your personal life is practically public property at this point, isn't it?" There was an awkward silence. Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Kay glanced at Denise with a look that suggested she wasn't sure where this was going. Hugh maintained his composure. "I'd prefer to keep some things private, if that's all right," he said. "The film is really quite good, and I think people would enjoy hearing about it." "Private?" Denise laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the studio. "You're an actor, darling. You gave up private when you became famous. That's the deal, isn't it?" "Actually, no," Hugh said, his voice becoming firmer. "That's not the deal at all. Being an actor means I share my work with people. It doesn't mean every aspect of my life is up for public consumption." Denise rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go. Another celebrity complaining about fame. You do realize you chose this life, don't you?" Jane Moore jumped in, clearly trying to steer things back on track. "Hugh, tell us about working with your co-star. I heard there were some really funny moments on set." Hugh looked grateful for the lifeline. "Yes, actually, there's this brilliant scene where we—" But Denise cut him off. "I wasn't finished," she said, her voice sharp. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room here. Your past relationships. The scandals. Don't you think you owe the public some explanation for your behavior over the years?" The studio went quiet. The audience, who had been murmuring and laughing along, fell silent. This was crossing a line, and everyone knew it. Hugh sat back in his seat, his jaw tightening. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for my private life," he said slowly. "I've made mistakes. I've been open about that, but I'm here to talk about my work." "Mistakes?" Denise scoffed. "That's a polite way of putting it. Some might say your behavior has been absolutely appalling. How do you sleep at night, knowing how you've treated people?" Nadia's eyes went wide. "Denise," she said quietly, reaching out to touch her arm. "Maybe we should." "What?" Denise snapped at her. "I'm just asking the questions everyone wants answers to. Isn't that our job?" "Your job is to interview me about the film I'm promoting," Hugh said, his voice rising slightly. "Not to sit here and insult me on national television." "Insult you?" Denise put her hand to her chest in mock innocence. "I'm not insulting you, darling. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference." "Holding me accountable?" Hugh leaned forward now, his calm demeanor cracking. "You don't even know me. You've spent the last 5 minutes making assumptions and judgments about my life based on tabloid gossip." Kay tried to intervene. "Let's all take a breath here," she said. "Hugh, why don't you tell us about—" No, Denise interrupted again. "Let him answer. Why are you getting so defensive if you haven't done anything wrong?" "I'm getting defensive," Hugh said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Because you're being incredibly rude. This is supposed to be a professional interview, not an ambush." "An ambush?" Denise laughed again, that same harsh sound. "You're so dramatic. This is just a conversation." "This is not a conversation," Hugh said. A conversation requires mutual respect. You've shown me none. The tension in the studio was now unbearable. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. The audience sat frozen, watching what was quickly becoming a complete disaster. Denise wasn't backing down. "I find it fascinating," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "that men like you come on shows like this, expecting us to just fawn all over you, to ask you softball questions and make you look good. But when someone actually challenges you, you can't handle it." "Challenging someone and being disrespectful are two entirely different things," Hugh said. "You're not a journalist doing hard-hitting investigative work. You're a talk show host who's being unnecessarily cruel for no apparent reason." "Cruel?" Denise's voice went up an octave. "I'm being cruel. That's rich. Coming from you." "What is that supposed to mean?" Hugh asked. "You know exactly what it means," Denise said, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "You've built your entire career on playing the charming, bumbling, nice guy. But everyone knows that's not who you really are, is it?" Hugh stared at her for a long moment. "You don't know anything about who I really am," he said quietly. "I know enough," Denise shot back. "I know that you think you're better than everyone else. I know that you expect special treatment wherever you go. I know that you—" "That's enough," Hugh said, standing up abruptly. The microphone clipped to his jacket crackled with the sudden movement. "I'm not going to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has some personal issue with me that I'm not even aware of." Denise looked shocked that he was standing. "Sit down," she said. "We're in the middle of an interview." "No," Hugh said firmly. "We're not. This stopped being an interview about 10 minutes ago. This became something else entirely." Nadia stood up too. "Hugh, please," she said gently. "I'm so sorry about this. Why don't we just—" "It's not your fault," Hugh said to her, his voice softening. "You've been nothing but kind. But I can't stay here and be treated like this." Jane Moore was also standing now. "Denise, this has gone too far," she said. "You need to apologize." "Apologize?" Denise remained seated, looking up at Hugh with defiance. "For what? For asking tough questions? For not treating him like he's royalty? For being rude," Kay said, also standing. "For making this personal. For breaking every rule of professional conduct we have." The cameras were still rolling. The audience was watching with their mouths open. This was live television, and there was nowhere to hide. Hugh started removing his microphone. "I've done thousands of interviews," he said, his hands working to unclip the device. "I've answered difficult questions. I've been challenged on my views, my work, my choices. That's fine. That's part of the job. But I've never in all my years doing this been treated with such open hostility and contempt." "Oh, please," Denise said, still sitting. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Hugh looked directly at her. "Let me ask you something. Why did you invite me here today? Was it to actually discuss my film? Or was it just so you could tear me down on television?" Denise didn't answer. "That's what I thought," Hugh said. He finished removing the microphone and placed it carefully on the table. "You know what's sad? This show is supposed to be about women supporting each other, having honest conversations, creating a space for real dialogue. But what you've done today is use this platform to bully someone. And for what? Ratings? To make yourself feel important?" "How dare you?" Denise said, finally standing up. "I have every right to ask you whatever questions I want." "You have the right to ask questions," Hugh agreed, "but I have the right not to answer them. And I certainly have the right not to sit here and be disrespected." The other panelists were now trying to physically place themselves between Hugh and Denise. Nadia was saying something about taking a break. Jane was trying to signal to the producers. Kay was attempting to calm everyone down, but Denise wasn't done. "If you walk out of here," she said, her voice threatening, "everyone will know what kind of person you really are." Hugh paused at the edge of the set. He turned back to look at her. "What kind of person am I, Denise?" he asked. "The kind who can't handle criticism," she said. "The kind who throws a tantrum when things don't go his way." Hugh laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you think this is? A tantrum? What else would you call it?" Denise challenged. "I'd call it self-respect," Hugh said. "Something you might want to look into." The gasp from the audience was audible. Denise's face went red. "Get out then," she spat. "Go on. Run away. That's what you do best, isn't it?" Hugh shook his head slowly. "You know what the saddest part of all this is?" he said. "I actually used to respect you. I thought you were smart, funny, someone who used your platform for good. But this is just mean-spirited and small." "I don't need your respect," Denise said. Clearly, Hugh replied. Nadia was nearly in tears now. Hugh, I'm so sorry, she said. This isn't what we do here. This isn't who we are. I know, Hugh said kindly, and I appreciate that. But I can't stay. Jane Moore stepped forward. For what it's worth, she said, I think you're handling this with far more grace than most people would. Thank you, Hugh said. Kay Adams nodded in agreement. This should never have happened, she said, glaring at Denise. We're going to have a very serious conversation after this. Denise threw her hands up. Oh, so now you're all turning on me? She said. I'm the bad guy here? Yes, Jane said bluntly. You are. The silence that followed was deafening. Hugh took a deep breath. I genuinely hope, he said, looking at all of them, that when you watch this back, you'll understand why I had to leave. I don't think I'm being unreasonable. I don't think I'm being oversensitive. I think I'm being human. Oh, spare us the speech, Denise muttered. But no one was listening to her anymore. Hugh walked toward the exit at the side of the set. The cameras followed him. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Some started clapping, slowly at first, then building. Others sat frozen, still processing what they had just witnessed. As Hugh reached the door, Denise called out one more time. You'll regret this, she said. Hugh stopped. He didn't turn around. No, he said over his shoulder. I really don't think I will. And then he was gone. The studio erupted into chaos. Nadia was visibly upset, wiping her eyes. Jane and Kay were both talking urgently to Denise, who had sat back down and was staring straight ahead with her arms crossed. The producers were shouting through earpieces, trying to figure out what to do next. We need to go to commercial, someone said. We need to apologize, someone else said. We need to figure out what just happened, a third voice added. Kay turned to the camera. We're going to take a quick break, she said, her voice shaky. We'll be right back. But everyone knew they wouldn't be able to just move on from this. Something had broken in that studio. A line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. As the commercial break started, Denise finally seemed to realize the gravity of what had happened. He was being oversensitive, she said to the others, but her voice lacked conviction now. No, Nadia said firmly, anger replacing her tears. You were being cruel. There's a difference. I was just doing my job, Denise protested. Your job is to interview guests, not attack them, Jane said. What were you thinking? I was thinking that someone needed to hold him accountable, Denise said. Accountable for what? Kay demanded. For being human? For having a past? We all have pasts, Denise. None of us are perfect. That's not the point, Denise said weakly. Then what is the point? Jane pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it looked like you had a personal vendetta and you used this platform to air it. That's not journalism. That's not even entertainment. That's just nasty. Denise had no response. In the control room, the producers were having their own crisis. This is going to be everywhere, one said. Every news outlet, every social media platform. This is a disaster. Should we cancel the rest of the show? Another asked. We have to go back on air, the director said. We can't just leave it like this. When the commercial break ended, only 3 women returned to the panel. Denise was nowhere to be seen. Kay addressed the camera directly. Welcome back, she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. As you just saw, we had a very difficult moment here. Hugh Grant has left the building, and Denise has stepped away from the panel. Nadia took over. I think we all need to acknowledge that what just happened was not okay, she said. As a show, we pride ourselves on creating a welcoming environment for our guests. Today, we failed at that. Jane nodded. Hugh came here to talk about his new film, she said. He came in good faith, expecting a professional interview. Instead, he was subjected to personal attacks and disrespectful treatment. He had every right to leave. We want to apologize to Hugh, Kay said, and we want to apologize to all of you watching. This is not the kind of show we want to be. This is not the kind of conversation we want to have. The 3 women sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had happened settling over them. I think, Nadia said softly, this is a reminder that just because someone is famous doesn't mean they're not entitled to basic respect and dignity. Fame doesn't make someone less human. It doesn't mean they deserve to be treated poorly. Absolutely, Jane agreed. And I think we all, myself included, need to remember that. We need to do better. The rest of the show was subdued. They tried to move on to other topics, but the energy was gone. The audience was uncomfortable. The remaining panelists were clearly shaken. Every few minutes, someone would reference what had happened, unable to fully let it go. Behind the scenes, the fallout was already beginning. Social media was exploding with clips of the altercation. People were taking sides, though the vast majority seemed to be supporting Hugh's decision to walk out. Hashtags were trending. Think pieces were being written in real time. In a quiet room somewhere in the building, Hugh was gathering his things. A producer had apologized profusely, explaining that they had no idea things would go that way. Hugh had been gracious, thanking the crew for their work, making it clear he had no issue with anyone except Denise. These things happen, he had said, though his hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Back in the studio, as the show finally wrapped, the three remaining panelists sat in exhausted silence. "That was awful," Nadia said finally. "It was worse than awful," Jane said. "It was humiliating, for all of us." "What was she thinking?" Kay asked, not expecting an answer. None of them had one. The incident would be talked about for weeks, months even. It would become one of those moments in television history that people referenced, that showed up in compilation videos, that got analyzed and discussed and debated. But in that moment, sitting in that studio, all three women could think about was how a simple interview had gone so terribly wrong. How a respected actor had been driven off their set, how their colleague had let personal feelings override professional conduct, and how sometimes the worst moments in television aren't scripted or planned. They're the real, raw, uncomfortable moments when someone decides they've had enough, when dignity and self-respect become more important than playing along, when walking away becomes the only option. Hugh Grant had walked off Loose Women that day not because he couldn't handle tough questions, not because he was being oversensitive or dramatic. He walked off because he knew his worth, because he understood that no job, no interview, no promotional appearance was worth being treated with such contempt. In that 36 seconds, when Denise had looked at him and said, "You know exactly what it means. You've built your entire career on playing the charming, bumbling nice guy, but everyone knows that's not who you really are," something had crystallized for him. He had realized that this wasn't about publicity or his film or even about the interview itself. It was about basic human respect. And when that respect was absent, no amount of professionalism or politeness could make up for it. The lights in the studio were dimming now. The audience had long since left. The crew was packing up equipment. Another show was done, but this one would not be forgotten. Nadia stood up slowly. "I need to go home," she said. "I need to process what just happened." "We all do," Jane said. Kay looked at the empty chair where Denise had been sitting. "I don't know how we come back from this," she said quietly. "I don't know either," Jane admitted, but they would have to figure it out. Tomorrow, there would be another show, another set of guests, another chance to do better. For now, though, all they could do was sit with the discomfort of what had happened, with the knowledge that they had been part of something that never should have occurred, that they had watched a colleague cross lines that should never be crossed, that they had witnessed a breakdown in basic human decency, broadcast live for millions to see. The silence in the empty studio was heavy, oppressive, filled with all the things that had been said and all the things that should have been said differently. Hugh Grant was gone. The interview was over. The damage was done, and somewhere out there, viewers were still talking about what they had witnessed, still debating who was right and who was wrong, still processing the raw, uncomfortable reality of watching someone stand up for themselves in real time. Because that's what it had been, ultimately. Not a tantrum, not an overreaction, but a simple, powerful assertion of self-worth. Hugh Grant had walked onto that set as a guest. He had walked off as someone who refused to be diminished, who refused to accept treatment that fell below basic standards of respect, who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply leave. The cameras were off now. The microphones were cold. The set was dark, but the moment would live on. Replayed, discussed, analyzed, a reminder that fame doesn't erase humanity, that politeness has its limits, that everyone, no matter how successful or well-known, deserves to be treated with dignity, and that sometimes 36 seconds is all it takes to reveal who someone really is. Not the person being attacked, but the person doing the attacking. Denise Welch had thought she was holding someone accountable. She had thought she was doing hard-hitting television. She had thought she was asking the questions that needed to be asked. But what she had actually done was reveal her own lack of professionalism, her own willingness to prioritize conflict over conversation, her own inability to separate personal feelings from professional responsibility. And in doing so, she had given Hugh Grant no choice but to do what he did, to stand up, to speak his truth, to walk away. The studio was empty now. The story was over. But the conversation was just beginning.